And of course, we'll continue to bring you all the latest as counting continues in the United States election. Well, joining me now with their thoughts on this and much more, former Labor Senator and regular Sky News contributor, Mr. Graham Richardson, is here in Sydney in the studio. They built a wall between the two of us because they're worried what would happen if we were in the same room together. And in Adelaide, South Australian Senator Alex Antic. How are you both? Alex first, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thanks, Rowan. What an interesting time we live in.
Fascinating time. Well, Richo, let's get on with it. We had a little bit of banter on Wednesday as we sat there. The results started coming through. You conceded it to Donald Trump, and then it's all turned round. Where are we now? Who's gloating? Am I gloating over you, or are you gloating over me? I'm confused.
I think I'm gloating.
Oh, damn.
But I'm never certain of these things. But I think I'm gloating. It would appear Biden's going to win. And I think it gets stronger for him almost by the minute today. Didn't look as good on the day, but it's looking a lot better now. As they call it, a late swing.
They do, but you were quite scathing on Wednesday about Biden, the candidate. Obviously, Trump could be branded a sore loser, if you like. I suspect that might be what you're thinking. But where do you stand on Biden as he's performed since? And do you still hold those concerns about him if he does win the presidency?
Oh, I definitely hold those concerns. For a bloke who occasionally doesn't know what room he's in or what his name is, you've got to have some concern. I think what you've got to do is moderate that concern, if you like, by knowing that around him there'll be some pretty smart people. I think it's going to be similar to the Reagan presidency, where Reagan didn't actually have to do much. He appointed some really clever people. They made the big decisions, and his silver tongue announced them. In this case, there'll be no silver tongue, but hopefully the decisions will nonetheless be the right ones.
Alex, I'm horrified to hear Joe Biden and Ronald Reagan, the great Ronald Reagan, mentioned in the same breath, but Richo's allowed to get away with these things. Alex, what do you make of the legal actions being pushed by Donald Trump in his campaign? Is there something fishy going on? Should Trump keep pushing? What's your take on it, Alex?
Well, first of all, I'll give Richo that one. I mean, I'll let him make that analogy. Ronald Reagan was one of my boyhood heroes, though, so I'm going to leave that one alone as well. But look, I think this is going to go on for a little while. I mean, we've seen, I suppose, unsubstantiated evidence at this stage of some questions that need to be asked. You relayed a whole lot of those earlier on, and they range from ballot harvesting to this mysterious 130,000 votes that just appeared in the middle of night. Look, there's a whole range of things that have to come and go. And the first thing that sort of strikes me is how glad I am that we've got the Australian Electoral Commission here who do such a great job in terms of our elections and the scrutiny in which they're contained. I mean, you can't imagine a polling booth, and I'm sure Richo's stood at many as well as a scrutineer. You can't imagine some of the things that we've seen out of the US going on in an Australian election. No scrutineers getting turfed. It's extraordinary, and I think, there's a lot of criticism for Donald Trump for asking the question of his legal rights, but, we're not playing for the president of the local RSL here, we're playing for the president of the free world, and with the greatest of respect, I think he's absolutely entitled to test these things in a court where that evidence is going to be tested. Absolutely, and I would argue that he has an obligation to the American people to ensure that the vote is seen to be clean.
Gentlemen, the Australian's Paul Kelly writes glowingly about a Biden administration and says that Biden comes to bury Trump's carnage with hope. Well, Alex, I'll go to you first. Trump delivered the lowest unemployment for blacks, Latinos and others have ever seen. Would you describe that as carnage?
Well, I mean, I could go on and on, actually, Rowan. I mean, he delivered, a peace accord with the UAE in a sense, a sort of a normalising of relations there. He knocked off Soleimani. With Israel. He even managed to get some dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, which is almost unthought of. There's a whole host of things. He's been a very good friend to Australia, people must remember. I mean, we're the only country, I think, that missed out on his aluminium tariffs. He's been very good to the Prime Minister, and he took over Obama's deal for the Manus Island deal, if you recall, as well. I'm most concerned about his $2 trillion on this, whatever it's going to be called, Biden Green New Deal, and what that does to US defence spending, what it does to their presence in the Indo-Pacific and the rise of the CCP. So I don't think we'd want to be cheering too loudly, although we always have a good relationship with the US, regardless of the President or the Prime Minister. But I think the jury's definitely out.
Richo, I want to change the topic. China is denying that it has any plans to ban Australian exports, which are worth $6 billion, despite there being reports in some of the state-controlled, or one of the major state-controlled tabloid. Trade Minister Simon Birmingham is urging Australians not to jump to conclusions after it was reported China would ban Australian wine, lobster, copper, sugar, timber and coal exports from today. So, Richo, I'd ask you, a few lobsters might be breathing a sigh of relief, I imagine, but is there a risk that this sort of thing might backfire on Xi Jinping? I mean, doesn't it work both ways? They import these things because they want them.
Well, nothing backfires on the Chinese leaders as far as the Chinese people are concerned, because the Chinese people are kept in ignorance. So I guess the only thing that can happen is there can be a loss of face with him, with some of the people on the Central Committee. I'm not sure how much that matters. All I know is that Australia has always been a great supplier to China, and a reliable one. And so China might get angry and spit the dummy and take the bat and ball and all those sayings. They may do that, but they won't do it for long. Australia is too good a market for them. They'll always come back, and in my view, they'll come back pretty quickly.
Well, maybe the lobsters could head over to New South Wales, Richo, because the New South Wales government is considering handing households a $100 restaurant voucher in a bid to stimulate New South Wales post-COVID economy. Richo, you're no stranger to the restaurant trade. Is this a good idea?
Well, $100 won't buy you a lobster anymore. So
Sadly.
I don't think it'll do much for the lobster trade, but I'll take my 100 and go and do my best for the country.
Alex, this will cost the state roughly $500 million. They did this earlier in the UK, and now they're going, whoops, maybe that led to they're now back in lockdown, as we'll talk to Brendan O'Neill shortly. But is this handing out money like this for people to go to the restaurant? Is this the right way to build an economy, Alex?
Well, it's good to see some heroic gestures of patriotism like Richo's just described. I, of course, would be happy to do the same thing, but I wouldn't tell the New South Wales government how to suck eggs, Rowan. But the truth is here, look, we know the hospitality industry is going through the ringer at the moment, and we've got a great deal of sympathy for that. Personally, from the dry economic perspective, I'd like to see state governments looking at things like payroll tax and reducing payroll tax as a way of increasing productivity, getting people employed and giving some money back through those sorts of mechanisms in the longer term. So, look, stimuluses are okay, but I think we're moving down a different path, hopefully, in the near future.
And Richo, just very quickly, despite public servant pay freezes during the COVID pandemic, government agencies have spent millions of tax dollars dishing out some $12.8 million in bonuses for top executives. Richo, Prime Minister Scott Morrison was angry last week over the Christine Holgate Cartier watches, yet we're seeing this sort of profligacy. What's your thoughts on it?
I've been amazed, actually, the last decade at how public service chiefs have been able to vote themselves massive increases. I mean, we're now getting to the stage where the public service chiefs are earning much more than their ministers, and I always wonder if that's a good thing. It seems to me that there's too much going to that top echelon of the public service. I'd rather give some to the people at the bottom than keep giving it to the people at the top. If you're a department head, I mean, you're on $1 million. How much do you need?
Exactly. Alex Antic, South Australian Senator, thanks so much for coming on. And Richo, I think if you and I pool our $100 each, we might just get a lobster between us. We could share it, mate. Over
You never know.
Beer. You never know. You're like Richo and Alex Antic, thanks so much for coming on. Credlin.